Hello there everyone. Today I want to show you how to make this large waves wirework bracelet. And this is what it looks like. So you have these like large wave shapes going around your beads with some wire weaving in it. So if you want to learn how to make that, then stay tuned. And here are the things that we'll need. Now we'll need the wire that we're going to work with. In this case I'm using some silver coated wire. You can obviously use whatever you want. And we're going to need some 1mm, which is an 18 gauge, and then we're going to need some 0.4mm, which is a 26 gauge. And that's going to be the weaving wire. And then we're going to need the beads that we're going to be using. In this case I'm using some 10mm beads, about a 10mm, and we only need 3 for this specific bracelet. And then you'll need some ribbon ends that look like this. And these specific ones are 20mm in size, and they're going to fit the bracelet perfectly if you're using the same materials. You're going to need a few findings like your clasp and extender chain and some jump rings, whatever you prefer. And then we'll need some pliers, some flat nose pliers and some wire cutters. And then you'll need a bit of glue as well. Now I like to use E6000 for this. So get your things together and then let's get started. So to get started we first need to cut off some lengths of wire. And what you'll need is you'll need your 1mm wire first, because that's going to be the base for our bracelet. And you'll need 10 lengths of these, so cut off 10 lengths, and each of them about 25 centimeters long. Because all you need to make sure is that they can reach around your wrist really, around the piece, and then just a little bit extra to work with at the ends. So that's the length you need, and you need 10 of them. And make sure that when you cut them, before you then start working with them, just make sure your wires are nice and straight as they can be. It's alright if they have a bit of a curve to them, but I mean try and avoid having kinks and bends in them, because that will affect the weave and the final look. So just make sure they're as straight as possible. And the next thing is to start off our weave. So you'll need to cut 2 separate lengths of your 0.4mm wire, which is your weaving wire. So 2 separate lengths, and each length needs to be 3.5 meters long. Because I prefer to do this piece without adding in wire, so just do each side in one whole length. So you'll need 3.5 meters per length for that. So we have our 10 lengths of the 1mm wire, and to start off our weave we need to use 5 of them. So just separate out 5 and put them to the side for now. We'll get back to them in a bit. And then we need to start off with these 5. So we have our 5 lengths of the 1mm wire, and we're just going to put a few of them to the side because we're going to start off working with 1 and then add them in gradually. So you have that one, and then you get your 0.4mm wire, you start with one end of it, and then you take your 0.1mm, so you take your 1mm, and now you want to just attach your 0.4mm to that, so we can then start incorporating the other wires. So towards the end of your 1mm, leave just a little bit of tail, and the same with your 0.4mm, also just a little bit of tail to work with at the end. And all I want to do is just wrap your 0.4mm around your 1mm a couple of times. It's just to attach it. Like so. So that now sits on there. So now we need to start adding in our other wires while we make the weave. So we now have a weaving wire attached to the first 1mm wire, and now we're going to start adding in the other wires and then start creating the weave. And it's going to be this zigzag weave that we're going to be doing. It looks like this. And to do this, you have it attached towards the end. Try and keep it around there. And then we need to bring in another wire. So put that on top and next to the other one, like so. And roughly so they're in the same place. And then my weaving wire, my 0.4mm wire, is coming out from underneath, around the bottom, and then going back around. So I'm going to follow that, and what I'm going to do is go around both wires together. So I'm just wrapping around both of the wires. I'm going to do that 3 times. And then make sure that your wraps are nice and tight, pushed together, so you get a nice and neat weave. Like that. And then as we're coming around the 3rd time, instead of going back around to the bottom, I'm going to come up in between the wires now. Like so. And then we're ready to add in the next wire, next 1 mil wire. So again, put that next to it, each time building on top, making sure the ends are roughly the same place. And then we're coming up through those 2 bottom wires, and then we want to go around the top 2. Again, around both of them. And then when we're weaving, we only want to weave around 2 wires at a time, so again we're now coming up through the same place that we just came up through already. So it's the top 2 we're weaving around now. Again, 3 times, making sure that your coils are nice and tight, up through the bottom 2 again. And the last time around, you get 3 wraps, like so. And then we need to come up between the 2 that we've just wrapped around. So that means up between the 2 top ones here. And then pull that. So basically we've done the same thing that we just did on the bottom one. And then add in the next wire. Again, stack it on top. And then we'll continue with the same thing, wrapping around the top 2 wires again. And then coming up between your wires, so you keep wrapping around those 2. So the beginning bit where we're wrapping them together is going to be the most fiddly part, because everything is still a bit loose, but once we get going and get it into place and continue the weaving and stuff, it'll become a lot less fiddly to work with. So like so, push them together so they're nice and tight, and that's 3 wraps. So again, we come up in between the 2 that we've just wrapped together, like so. And then that means that we're now ready to add in the last wire of this bunch. So that's our 5th wire. Stack it on top again, and then we'll go around those top 2. Like so. And again, just wrap around the top 2 wires 3 times. So repeating the same step basically that we've done since the beginning. And do this 3 times again. So that's 3 times. Push them together so they're nice and tight. And now what we need to do is work our way back down, so we form this zigzag pattern. And to do that, instead of now going in between those 2 like we would have done if we were to do another wrap, we need to go down 3 wires. So in between here, so you have 2 at the bottom and 3 at the top. Come in between there, because we now need to step down. So that means on the back side, you can see that it'll go across 3 wires instead of 2 like the wraps we've just done. So again, you then need to wrap around 2 wires at a time. We're stepping down one, so we're taking out the top wire and wrapping around the next 2, like so. Again, up where we just came up already, and down again the same place. Keep wrapping around these 2 and do that 3 times again. Each step that we do is 3 times. You can choose to do more or less as well. It's just for this particular bracelet I did 3. Push them together so they're nice and tight. So that's that one. Now we need to step down again. So that means we go down another wire. So on the back we'll go across 3 wires again instead of 2. So we're going to come up between the bottom 2 wires, like so. And you can try and separate out your wires a bit to make it easier to weave in between them, like this. So it's now these 2 wires, these, that we need to wrap around 3 times. Once and twice, back up to do a third one. Push them nice and tight to keep your weave nice and neat, like so. So that's this step. So we're slowly getting that triangle, first triangle shape. So now we need to come all the way down to the bottom and wrap around the bottom 2 wires. So we just come all the way down here and then just go down between this place. So we have 2 wires at the bottom that we're wrapping around. One more time to make it 3. Like so. So there we have our first little step triangle made. And then what you can do, say if your wires have moved a bit out of place, you can still pull your wires through your weave for now. And pull this one down a bit, like so. And just to make sure that these are roughly about the same length, the ends. So we've made that first step. So now we're just going to put this to the side because we started it off. Put this to the side, and then we're going to grab the other wires. So your other 5 1mm wires, and then we're just going to do the same thing on these. So start with 1, and then get your other weaving wire, so the other length of 0.4 that you cut off. And now we need to just get this one started as well. Now the only thing you need to make sure of is, I'll show you on the bracelet, you can see I made sure that they go opposite, so basically mirrored. If you go across the middle they'll be mirrored, so you just need to make sure that it goes the other way. So we're going to attach it towards the end again, towards the end of the 1mm, and leave a bit of a tail both on the 1mm and then on the 0.4mm, and just attach it like so. And then bring in another of your 1mm wire, and then I'm just going to put this on the bottom now instead. It just slipped off my wire, but you can just easily pop it back on, like so. So you put your 1mm beneath this time, because you now need to use the rest of your long length of the 0.4mm and then wrap around both of them here to start off this weave. Again, 3 times, like so. And then that's the third one, so now we come up between the wires to get into position to then add the next one. Again, I put that on the bottom now. Then wrap around those two 3 times. Like so, make sure they're nice and tight. And then you see I went up just from because I'm autopilot, but we need to come up through those two that we just wrapped around instead. After you wrap around the third time, you come up in between. Adding in the next wire, wrapping around those two. Again, 3 times. When you've done that, come up in between those two. And then it's time to add the very last wire, so the 5th one. And then just wrap around those two. Like so. And then the third time coming around, we'll go down on the back but cross over 3 of the wires to step down the other way. And then down in between, so we then only wrap around those 2 wires. So we're doing the exact same thing as on the other one, it's just mirrored really. And when you wrap this weave, because I was wrapping around 2 wires each time we wrap, but still then the next time we're going to go in between, you want to make sure you don't wrap too tightly because that might close up these wires. So when you're then supposed to go in between, I'm just going to step down one, go in between, if you wrap too tightly, you might not be able to get your 0.4mm all the way in and sit close to your other weaves. So just wrap with a nice and even tension if you can. And wrap around these 2, 3 times. And then the third time coming around, we'll go all the way to the top 2 and then wrap around those to finish off this stepped triangle. And just making sure as you go along that all your wraps nice and neat and pressed together, just to keep it neat. So and one more time. Make it 3 and then just press them together like so. And then as you go you can see that your wires will probably get a little bit out of shape as you're working with it, but just don't worry about it too much. Just make sure that as you go along that where you're weaving, to try and make sure they're as straight as possible. You can always go over and just straighten them out afterwards before you start weaving in that area. Like so. So that side is ready now. So now what we need to do is put them together at the end so we can then start creating the rest of the bracelet. So the way that I did that, we're just going to take one at a time And then we need to get our wires into shape so they'll fit together and then go inside the ribbon end. Now with this, I'm just going to undo the individual wraps that I did in the beginning, just like so. So all there is that step triangle shape. So this is your tail coming out. Now what I'm going to do is go across all my wires one at a time and then bend them outwards a little bit. I'll get this tail out of the way. So you want to look and see where you, if you went to the bottom of where you started, so basically go straight across your wires and then start with the top one, like here, and then just bend it outward a little bit, just at a slight angle, maybe like a 45-degree angle, and then grab the next one in the same place, and bend that one outward, same angle so they lie next to each other, and then the next one, same thing. And as you can see, you can still maneuver them around a bit, but this is where what we're doing now is going to end up then keeping them in place. So when we continue with the bracelet, they're not going to keep moving anymore. And bend it, and then the last one, also bend it in the same direction. So you have something roughly like this, and then you can just adjust them so they sit pretty evenly. So you bend, none of them are really crossing over each other, they're just all bending in the same place. So that's the first one. And the other one, you want to get and do the same thing, but remember, just go in the opposite way. So if you get the first one and have a look, they're going to lie like this. So what we need these ones to bend the other way so we can put them together. We just do the same thing, start from the outside, put a slight bend in, grab the next one, move all the way across, just one at a time. And the last one, like so. And we have these wires bent at an angle. So then, when we put them together, so if we put these two ends together, you can see it's going to come out rather than these lying right next to each other, because we need it to come out at an angle to then fit the bead in there. But this might not be perfect. You can see I probably bent them a bit too far, because you don't want, this is going to be the space that we're going to start creating basically. Obviously you don't want them to sit this far out in the beginning, but it's just to get the bend in there, and you can just adjust it as you go. So you can just easily just take your hands and bend them back a little bit, because once you have the bend in there, you flatten those pliers. That's the main thing. And these as well. So we get them to sit just right. That's a bit better. So it's just manoeuvring it around a bit until they sit right. There is no right or wrong specifically really, because you can still bend these after we've put them together. So that's the next step now, is we need to just put these two separate pieces together. And this is probably going to be the beginning here is like the most fiddly part of the whole thing. Because like I said, once we fasten them together and then put the ribbon end on, because that's what we're going to put on at the end here, you can have this end that you can hold on to. So it's going to be a lot better. But first we just need to attach them together. So I'm going to just make sure that my weave is pushed down to where the bend starts. So I'm happy with how they're sitting. And then I'm going to use these tails that we left now to weave the ends here together. So as you can see, the fiddly part now is because we have these two separate pieces that we're trying to hold together into position. So all I'm going to do is just take one of the tails, just start with one of them, and just wrap it around the two middle ones. So the first one on the one side and then the first one on the other side. And just do that a couple of times. Try and make sure that by now everything kind of sits in place, so your weaves are sat where you want them to sit, because you're using the tails now, so once you're using the tails they'll be locked in place as well. So just wrap around the two inner ones, two wires in the middle, one from each side, a couple of times. One more, make it 3. To kind of match the weave as well, because we want this to just blend in still as well. So that's the middle attached. So what I'm going to do is just use the other tail. This is really kind of a matter how you want it to, how you think it's going to fit. I'm just going to then wrap around on the side where it comes from the tail first. Just a few times around those two wires. Again, I'm just doing it 3 times to kind of match the weave, because if anything that won't be covered by the ribbon end. Like so. Come up again. And then I'm going to go over. It's just the best way that you can find of doing this, really, of attaching them. I'm just going to come up through the middle two that you wrap together with the other tail, and then down so I wrap around these 2 wires right here. It's just basically trying to find a way to secure it all in place. And once you've done this step, it'll be a lot easier to do the rest of it. Then move over to the other side to get some wraps on there. If this part isn't too neat, don't worry too much about it, because part of this will be covered by the ribbon end. And then it's kind of whatever you think. You can go back to using the other tail again if you want to. You can always put the end up through somewhere as well to get into the place where you want to start wrapping. You need to bring just these 2 together. But like I said, I'm kind of just doing it the way that I feel it's going to secure it in place. You don't have to do specifically the exact same thing. Just make sure that you wrap it around different wires to secure it in place. So roughly like this, really. And you can always bend these a bit if they've gone out of shape. Don't worry about, they don't have to sit straight or anything at the end, because most of this will be cut off and then the rest will be inside the ribbon end. So it's just something like this, really. So they're now attached crossing over both sides so you can see. I can't pull it apart now. I can still pull the wires out, so be careful you don't pull them out, because you can pull them through the weave still. But that's just for now until we get it attached. So that's them attached to each other, the two separate sides. So now what we need to do is you can go in and cut your tails off if you want to, or you can continue using them until you've used them up basically. So I think I'm going to just cut them off. I'm going to find the best place to do that. Just cut off the ends when you're done using them, like so. And now what we need to do is cut these down a little bit, because as you can see the ribbon end can't take up all these wires. So we'll cut them down a bit, so find out roughly where the ribbon end is going to sit. If you want it to overlap some of this weaving that you've just done, to weave them together, to cover that up a little bit. And then roughly figure out where it is that you need to cut your wires. Make sure everything sits right. If you need to pull any wires before you cut them, do that. Like so. So I'm going to go across and cut them all off, just one by one, to the same length. Like this. So we now have this left, and be careful as well now, try and just keep hold of it, hold it in place. You don't want to be pulling any wires out if you can help it. If you do pull one out, it's not a big deal, just try and maneuver it back into place, because if you pulled it out it'll be able to go back in. But try and keep hold of it, and then we just need to get our flat nose pliers again, because what I'm going to do is just go in and bend the very tip of these 1mm wires. Just first of all, because if we put the ribbon end on like this, even though we're going to be putting glue in there, chances are, maybe at least over time, that you'll be able to just pull them out. So that's why I'd like to basically, you can call it maybe roughen up the ends of it, because it makes a glue, that gives a glue and the ribbon end something to grasp onto. So I'm just going to go in and bend them all, just in different directions, whatever you think suits, just back and forth, crossing over each other, not too much crossing over each other because it's going to make it bulky, but just a bit back and forth really. And the outer ones, especially the very outer one, I always bend them inward, because obviously if you bend that outward, chances are it'll stick out the side of your ribbon end, and you don't want that. So just bend that inward like this. And the same on the other side. Bend them in different directions. And get to the outer ones. Bend them inward, like so. And then you just go in with your flat nose pliers and maybe just squeeze them down so they're not as bulky, like that. And then the ribbon end is going to go on top of this. The ends of your wire inside of there. But first, I'm just going to use some glue to help keep it in place. And what I like to use for this is E6000. I think this is a really good glue for this, because it's really strong. And then it dries clear as well, so if anything spills out, then you don't have to worry too much because it dries clear. So get a bit, I just normally use a toothpick, and get a bit, put it inside your ribbon end, up the sides of it, down the bottom, to cover the whole side. You don't want to put too much because it'll come spilling out, but just enough to cover all the sides. And then I get a bit more. And I always just go over the ends of the wire as well and put glue on here, and make sure to kind of get it in between the wires so that once you place it inside the ribbon end, it all kind of connects together and really grabs onto each other. Again, not too much, just enough to cover everything. So roughly something like this. And then I'm going to get the ribbon end and then place the wires inside of there, the ends of the wires, like so. So it sits on there, and as you can see the size fits pretty perfectly. So all the ends are hiding in there. Make sure that you're happy with how it sits before you then go in and use your flat nose pliers to start clamping it down. You don't want to go in just on one end and just clamp it all the way down. You want to go across, do a little at a time, gently, because it could maybe move and then sit in the wrong place, but then you've kind of gone all the way down. Just make sure you can still maneuver it, adjust it until you're completely happy. And when you are, try and hold it in the place where you want it to sit. And then go in and then squeeze it all the way down. Just put some nice force into that, all the way across, because then it will really sit in place. Make sure you squeeze the ends down, and I normally come in from the bottom as well. So like so. And then that's attached and it's nice and secure. Obviously the glue is still wet, so I recommend that before you continue that you let the glue dry, and then it'll be really nice and secure. So I've now let the glue dry inside the ribbon end, and it's not going to go anywhere, it's on there nice and secure now. And we have our triangles, one on each side with the weaving. So what we need to do now is continue the weave, and as you can see now it's going to be a bit easier, not so fiddly, because you have this end to hold on to while you're then doing your weave. So what we need to do is then on both sides we need to continue the weave for a bit, and it's just the exact same weave. So see where you've come from first. So I'm coming down between the two bottom ones to do the last wrap around the bottom to finish off that triangle. So what I need to do is step up, so I need to come up between the two bottom ones. And then move up 2 wires and go down between them, and then wrap around those two that we just wrapped around once. Wrap around them 3 times, just like we were doing the whole time to create this triangle. So it's the exact same weave. And again, keep pushing it down every time. Make sure it gets nice and tight and even. And then down for the 3rd wrap. Push it tight. And now, because that was the 3rd one, I need to come up between the 2 wires that I've just been wrapping around. to move up one step and then wrap around the next two. Again 3 times. Like so. So you're starting to get this side of your triangle of the next one. And now, because that was the third one, I need to bring my weaving wire up between the two that I've just wrapped around, and then wrap around the top 2 wires to basically create the top of the triangle. And that's the third time I'm coming around. So we're now back to the other side and we need to step down. And we just do the exact same thing as we did in the beginning. To step down you want to go behind 3 wires. And then go in between them. So you come up here to then wrap around these 2 wires, so leaving out the top one and the bottom 2. So this is to step down. And wrap around them 3 times. And again that's a third, so we need to step down again. So come up behind 3 wires and then up between the 2 bottom ones. And then again 3 times around those 2 wires. So just remember, on the one side we're stepping up 1, and then we'll reach the point we need to step down 1 wire every time we move. Like so. Now we reach the bottom, so we just bring it behind all the way down around the bottom wire, and then wrap around the bottom 2 ones. Like so, and again 3 times. And make sure everything is pushed together so it's nice and tight and even looking. So there we now have 2 triangles on the one side. So what we need to achieve is, on the one I've already made, I've made a certain amount of triangles going all the way around to try and keep the large waves even. So from the very beginning I've done 1, 2 and then 3, and then I've added the bead. So first off I've done 3 triangles on each side, and then we add the bead. So what we need to do on this side, we need to do another one, and then we need to move to the other side and use the other weaving wire for this side and do 2 on there. So we have 3 triangles on each side, and then we need to add in the bead. So continue doing this until you reach that point, and then I'll show you how we do that. So I've now made my 3 triangles on each side, and the only thing I'll say, just at the bottom when you do the very last wraps on the bottom 2 wires on each side, instead of doing 3 on there, just do 2 for now, because this is where we want to add our bead in. So the way I do that is, I'm just going to get one of my weaving wires at a time, and then I'm going to get one of my beads out. So this is my purple colour hematite, and just put my bead onto that weaving wire. And then what you need to do is get the weaving wire from the other side, get the end of that, and then go through that the opposite way. And then pull it down nice and gently so you don't damage the wire. And then this is how the bead is going to sit. So when you pull them tight. Now what you can do as well at this point, or before you add the bead even, if your base wires and where you weaved on is a little bit not in the right shape, then you can adjust them and just like straighten them out and just get the right curves in there. So you can do that as you go, because the wires can lose their shape as you're working with them, but then just put them back into shape once you get to that place to put them in place. And then you can just adjust your wires to fit the bead, like so, and then the bead's going to sit right here. And then what we need to do is secure it in place and then continue the weave. So now our wires, the weaving wires, have actually switched place. So the one from the bottom has gone through the bead and up to the top, and from the top through the bead and down to the bottom. But that doesn't matter because obviously it's the same kind of wire we're using. So I'm going to show you how to continue. Like I said, the very last wraps we did on the bottom 2 wires on each side, we only just did 2 wraps. The reason for this is we're going to finish it off with the wire that we just brought through. So kind of hold your wires in place, make sure they sit right. So your bead sits nice and in place, and then I'm just going to go around the bottom 2 wires with the new wire that we switched place, just to finish off that bottom weave. So this is basically the 3rd wrap around the bottom 2 wires. So this is also to make it blend in. So even though we switch wires, it's not going to be visible and obvious that we have. It's just going to kind of seem like one continuous piece. And obviously you want to do the same thing on the top. Come around from the bottom. And then just finish off that last wrap with the 3rd one around the bottom 2 wires. Bring it up. And just before you wrap completely, make sure it all sits right and you don't have too much gap or any gaps above or below your bead, so it sits nice and tight in there. And then do that final wrap. That then is going to secure it in place, and then it sits there nicely in place. And then now what we need to do is just basically continue with our triangles. So on this, I'm coming from around there, so I need to step up. You can always change the way you're holding it if you need to make it easier. So I then need to step up with my weaving wire. And then just make sure as you're doing this, especially, that everything is pushed nice and tight. As you go, just make sure you push it down so you don't get any gaps on that. And then you just wrap around those 2-3 times, just like you've been doing the whole time. To form those triangles. Like so, 3 times, and then you need to step up again. So the exact same thing that we've done to form the other ones. So continue that and do the same thing on the other side, because then the point we've reached is we've added this first bead, and so we've reached the point where we need to then form the next few triangles, come back down, and then cross over our base wires. So do another 3, just like 3 on the first side of the bead, do another 3 triangles on the other side, and do the same thing where you don't wrap the very final wraps, just leave out the very third one, just like when you added the bead, because we just need to secure this in place as well. So continue and wrap those 3 triangles, and then I'll show you this step. So I've completed my 3 triangles on each side, and then just left out the very last wrap around on both sides. So what we need to do now is cross our wires over at this point where we've added the first bead, and then we need to cross them over. So to do that, you've weaved like you have done, and I've done. So what you need to do is gently then start shaping it into place, because you want this kind of almost eye shape around your bead. So just move them gently, and obviously decide which one you want to go with the other one. It doesn't really matter. Something roughly like this. So you get the nice curves on it. Ideally, if you can avoid any like straight pieces or sharp bends and that, so just keep your curves in the wire. And then what we have is the 2 weaving wires coming out of the back, and we haven't quite finished the very last wrap around the bottom 2 on each side. That's because we're going to do pretty much exactly the same thing that we did when adding the bead. We're just going to switch our wires over to basically help lock this crossover in place. So the way that I do that is just you can start with one side, it doesn't really matter which one. You just start using, you want to finish off that last wrap, but you basically just start using the wire coming from the other side. So that's why you just make sure to cross them over. Make sure you have it, the wires sitting exactly where you want them to sit, and then just do that very last wrap around the bottom 2. So I'm going to take the one that's originally from this side, and then I'm going to come up and use that on the other side, which is the one that's crossing over the top for me, and then just do that one wrap around the bottom 2. Making sure it's all in place, like so. And then you can either just continue like that, or you can just do the other wrap straight away. It's up to you. So you have that coming from this side, and then out at the back, and you just want to then finish off that wrap going around the bottom 2 wires on this piece to finish off that, like so. And then make sure they sit in place, because then once you then continue your weave, making sure that you still keep it nice and tight, press it down the whole time as you go along, then that will blend in as well, the same as it did with the bead. And again, you just, up to this point, you want to make sure that all this sits the way you want it to sit, so all the curves and bends are right. But then from now on, we want to then continue our weaves. So make sure you figure out what wire you used for what, and then we've finished off that last triangle on both sides basically now. And then what we want to do is do one more triangle on each side. Now this is the only like fiddly part throughout, because you're making your weaves while your wires are crossed, your base wires are crossed over each other. But just take your time and do it gently, and you can always flip it over if you need to. Just remember that one is the back side, and the wraps look a little bit different, the weave looks a little bit different. The shape is the same, but some places you have your wires going over 3 of your base wires, or just over 1, because to get it to look that specific way on the front. But then you just continue stepping up and back down and up and back down on both of your base wires, both sides, just for this crossover point. And then I'll show you what to do next. So I've now done an extra triangle on each set of wires. So on the one crossing over the top and on the one crossing over at the bottom. And this section is now nice and securely held in place because we switched our wires over right at the beginning. So now we've reached the point where we need to start working on the next section. Now what we want to do is have it look the same way because we counted our triangles to get an even look. So we have 3 on each side of the bead on both sides. And in this way what it does is the tip of the triangle is pointing outward. So we want to do the same thing on the next section. So in order to do that, we just need to basically change direction of our triangles. So what we need to do is just do one more, basically half a triangle. We just need to step up one more time. So basically the crossover section will be 1.5 triangle once you've done this. So you just do exactly the same thing, same weave. Moving up, stepping up every time and remembering to do 3 wraps if that's the pattern you're making, same as me. Stepping up again. Just doing the same weave. We're just going to only do half a triangle. Almost at the top. Around the top 2 ones on their own. Make sure it's still nice and tight, so push your weave and your wraps together. Like so. So that's one extra line, you can say, half a triangle we've done. So now the crossover section has 1.5 triangles. You also want to just do the same on the bottom, because this now puts us into position to then have the tips of the triangles be outward on the next section as well. So we can count the same amount of triangles as we did in the first one. So just do that on the other side and the other one as well, and then I'll show you how we do the next section. So I've done that extra little bit of weaving now, both on the top one and the bottom one. So just half of the triangle. And now we're in position where basically we can start the next section to look exactly like the first one. So then all you do is you're already in position, you finished off that row. So what you need to do now is start making your next triangles. So if you remember at the beginning, what we did is we did 3 triangles on each side and then we added a bead. So you'll just need to do exactly the same thing. Start from here and then make 3 triangles working across. Go to the other one, make 3 triangles as well. And then shape them into place. Add your bead in the center like we did here. Crossing them over. Remember to leave out the last wrap around the bottom 2 wires on both sides, and then make that wrap after you cross your wires over. And then continue with another 3 triangles on the other side of the bead, and then we reached another crossover. So we started on this end, made the first section, that's what we created here. We've done our first crossover, we're in position to start the next section, which is exactly the same. So just remember, if you want to keep it symmetrical, do the same amount of triangles, add a bead, and then the same amount of triangles. and then another crossover, exactly the same way that we've just done. And then the last section, same amount of triangles, add the bead, and then same amount of triangles. And then all that's left is to finish off this end, which we'll basically do in the same way that we started off this end. But then the only difference is your bracelet has been made in the meantime. So just continue like that, you just keep doing the same thing for the rest of the bracelet. So I've now continued the full length of the bracelet, and I finished off the other end, and I just continued the way I showed you at the beginning, doing the same thing 3 times, and then explained to continue to do it. And then the other end, just finished it off the exact same way. So just when you get to the end, instead of crossing them over like you would do in one of the joins, you just put them together and then you bend them back just like you did in the beginning. And then you connect the 2 sides together with your weaving wire, and then cut them short down to a short length, and then bend them like I showed you in the beginning as well to get them inside the ribbon end, and then glue that in place and clamp it down, and then let it dry, of course, like the first one. So that's just how I've finished it off. I continued to the full length, and now we're left with this piece. So what there's left to do now is bend it into shape, and all I normally do is I just do that with my fingers. So I just start gently bending it, and obviously because you have your beads in there, I usually just try and be careful not to like press on the beads, just because I don't want to weaken the wire if I can help it. So I just make sure to press on the actual wire and weaved wire. So you just gently go across. So don't go in one place and make like a big bend, because that'll most likely rather take it out of shape. But just move your way back and forth a little at a time. And then if you do too much, you can always bend it back. And then the ends, you want to bend in even more to get that kind of oval shape to fit around your wrist. So we're getting there. It's pretty much there. Any small readjustments, just do them. Until you're completely happy with the shape, and you can always try it on and see how it sits on your wrist. And if you're quite happy with how it sits and the shape it has, then obviously you're done bending it into shape. And then all there's left to do is use your ribbon ends and the little loops on there to attach your jump rings, and then your clasp. I'm just going to use a lobster claw clasp, and then an extended chain if that's what you want to use. So that's how I'll finish it off, and then basically that's the bracelet done. So I hope you enjoyed that, and thank you very much for watching. Hello there everyone. Today I want to show you how to make this Elvish inspired wire wrapped pendant. And this is what it looks like. So in this one I'm using some labradorite gemstones. You can always choose to use whatever you want. And even though it's quite delicate, it's still quite strong. So if you want to learn how to make that, then stay tuned.